Shalom, Shavua Tov. I want to talk about a mark that is missing from this week's parsha. When God calls to Moses at the burning bush, he says, Moshe, Moshe, Moses, Moses, but there is no mark in between the two names. Now, that is not the case when God calls to Abraham on Mount Moriah at the time of the binding of Isaac, where it says, Avraham, mark, a little vertical line, and then Avraham again. Why is there no mark by Moses while there was one by Abraham? What is the secret? So let's dig in. Moses grows up in the palace of Pharaoh, but he wants to see the plight of his brethren, so he goes out and he finds the Egyptian beating the Israelite, and he looks this way and he looks that way, and he sees there is nobody looking, and he smites the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. How did he kill him? Well, the rabbis tell us he didn't use a baseball bat, nor did he use a sword, nor did he use a weapon. Rather, he killed him by uttering the divine name of God. Wow. How did Moses learn this? I mean, he grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. He grew up in an Egyptian environment. Where would he have a chance to learn all of these secrets of the Kabbalah, as it were, of the secrets of Judaism, to be able to use the divine name in order to kill the Egyptian? He hasn't yet been to the burning bush. That's where he got his first revelation. That's where he spoke to God. So how was he able to do that? You could say that it was his mother, because after all, Moses was, even though brought up in the palace of the king, nursed by his actual biological mother, and he knew who his family was. How do we know that? Because when Moses is arguing with God at the bush that he doesn't want to be the one to go, God says, go and your brother Aaron will be happy to help you. And when Moses goes, he and Aaron meet and they embrace. So obviously, they knew each other. So Moses was aware of that. I'm sure he learned many things from his mother Yocheved, who was his nursemaid. Nonetheless, was she able to teach him how to use the divine name in order to kill the Egyptian? Very strange. A further question. The Torah says when Moses was about to kill the Egyptian, he looked this way and that way, which we normally interpret to mean he looked to make sure there weren't going to be any witnesses. But the rabbis say he was looking for something else. He was looking into the future with almost prophetic vision to try to see, is this Egyptian going to have a descendant who's going to become a convert, who will be a righteous person? The implication being, if he would, then Moses would not slay him. Now that is not in accordance with Jewish law. Jewish law says if a person is liable to the death penalty, and we can assume that this Egyptian was liable to the death penalty because he was what you would call a pursuer, a rodef, in which case Moses has to kill him, well then, we don't take consideration of any impact on anybody else. As a matter of fact, in the book of Genesis, when Tamar is deemed to have committed adultery, which she was ultimately released from because Judah admitted that it was he who was with her, but until that point, she was going to be given the death penalty, even though she was pregnant at the time. So we don't take into consideration anybody in the environment of this person. If they're guilty, they get the penalty. So why is Moses concerned about maybe even in a few generations there's going to be some righteous person coming from this Egyptian? The answer to all of these questions is in Moses's main, I guess we could say, character trait. Something that empowered him to become who he was. Moses was tested 3 times, and in each of these 3 times we find a common theme. The first test was with the Egyptian and the Israelite. The second test was on the next day when he found 2 Israelites arguing, and one was about to hit the other, and Moses stood up and called him an evil person for threatening violence. And the third test was when Moses flees to Midian. He sits by the well. Jethro's daughters come out to get water, but the other shepherds kick them out and chase them away, and so Moses gets up and he rescues them. In each of these 3 cases, Moses pursues justice. He pursues the bad guys and chases them away or kills them in order to make sure that justice is done. How did he come to this? So I think that we will start by seeing Moses had one character trait that caught God's eye. Moses, according to the Torah, was in the wilderness. The rabbis fill in the blanks. He was chasing a runaway goat, and he spies the burning bush. And Moses makes a fateful decision. he goes to look at that bush. Now, this means that he was not going to continue chasing the goat. He would lose money. He could have said, I'm busy right now. Can't check out that bush. Maybe if it's still there on the way back, I'll see it then. No. Moses has to go and see that bush. Something inside him drives him to do it. And God sees, says the Torah, that Moses has turned aside to look. The implication being that had Moses not turned aside, God would not speak to Moses, and Israel would have to be redeemed by somebody else. What compelled Moses to look for that bush? So let's take a look at the patriarchs. Each of them had a unique character trait. Abraham was known for his chesed, his kindness. Isaac was known for his gevurah, his heroism, in guarding and protecting the legacy of Abraham. And Jacob was known for his attribute of truth, of emet. These three attributes are critical, but the first two do have weaknesses. What are the weaknesses? That they can lend themselves to a corruption. And we see that in the children of those patriarchs, that kindness means going beyond the call of duty to help somebody else, but that can devolve into reaching into other people's property and taking that which is not theirs. And that was expressed in the personality of Ishmael, about who it is said, his hand is against everybody. And then the character trait of heroism, of gevurah, that Isaac embodied, his willingness to do everything to preserve the legacy, also can devolve into violence and attack. And that was expressed in his son Esav, who was a violent person who attacked others. But the third character trait of Jacob, of truth, this is complete. The word emet contains three Hebrew letters, aleph, mem, and taf. The first, the middle, and the last letter of the Jewish alphabet to teach us that truth is complete. And indeed, we find that none of Jacob's sons had the bad character traits of Esav or Ishmael before them. They were all men of truth, and therefore they all received the Abrahamic blessing. The attribute of truth was Jacob's great accomplishment, and it brought him on that ladder up to the gates of heaven. Moses was going to take truth to another level. He was going to bring truth and go up to the heavens themselves to bring heavenly truth into the world. Because somebody who is motivated by truth must understand everything. And Moses sought to understand everything. Everything had to make sense. He wanted to know why the righteous sometimes suffer and why the evil sometimes prosper. He could not see that burning bush and say, well, that's interesting, I've got to go now. He needed to understand it. Moses was the most humble of all human beings. Humility means lowness, but lowness is not worthlessness. Lowness means, I don't think I know, and therefore I am open to learn. The Torah is compared to water. Water leaves the high places. It flows down specifically to the low places, and thus humility is where the true wisdom is. And Moses, says the Torah, was the most humble human who ever lived. And that made him a receptacle for truth. Truth which is complete. There's no such thing as 99% truth. Truth must be 100%. Everything must make sense. And an extension of truth. Truth causes one to pursue justice. The great Brisker Rav gave a brilliant explanation to this little episode of Moses killing the Egyptians. And he raises the question we raised. Why does Moses care if this Egyptian is going to have a righteous descendant? That's not the law. The law is the criminal must pay, whatever the consequences. Ah, says the rabbi from Brisk, that only applies in human law. If a human court is going to carry out a punishment, then they cannot be concerned because they're not prophets. They don't know who the descendants are going to be. Therefore, they have no choice to do the best they can of truth in this world. Indeed, truth in this world is not perfect, but divine truth, that's different. And when somebody is liable to a divine death penalty, meaning something that a human court cannot prosecute, but indeed they have committed a sin and they are worthy of divine punishment, mita bidei shemayim, as we say, death at the hands of heaven, well then the consideration of will there be descendants, what will be the impact on the friends and the family, all of those things do come into play, because that is a much more complete, it's a 100% truth. This person must be worthy of death in every angle, and if there is any mitigating circumstances that a human court could never know, so then that person cannot be punished. And this is what Moses did, says the Brisker Rav. Moses killed this person with the divine name. I don't think it means that he just gave some kind of a hocus pocus and the person dropped dead. I think what it means is that Moses called down divine judgment upon this Egyptian, divine death penalty. And in that case, there must be a clarity that there is going to be no negative implication to anyone else, that this person will never have any righteous people in the future. And we see this character of truth come to the fore when Moses will call down a different divine punishment on Korach. Korach, the rebellion of Korach, as we read in the book of Numbers, is a rebellion where Korach is complaining that Moses and Aaron do not need to be the leaders. Korach is taking his place in opposition to Moses as the Torah leader. And Moses makes an interesting speech before Korach is swallowed up. He says, I have not stolen any of their oxen. I have not done anything bad to any of them. Would one even think to say that Moses would have done bad to any of these people? Why was Moses saying this? He was saying it to show that there is nothing personal in this battle. There is no mitigating factor of perhaps Moses was insulted. No, Moses is calling down divine justice, and therefore it has to be perfect. And therefore Moses is making it clear that there is no personal animosity, that if God sees that Korach is guilty, and Moses was objecting to Korach's falsehoods, because a man of truth cannot tolerate it, so then Korach would be punished, as indeed happened. And so we see the little line in Abraham as opposed to Moses, where there is no little line separating the names. Why is that the case? Because Abraham was, let's do it this way. When a Torah repeats the name twice, the first time it's the potential of the person. It's their image, as it were, in heaven. And the second repetition is how they actually lived their lives. And Abraham was how great, we can't even begin to say how great he was. But even so, his divine potential was a little more than he actually fulfilled, as we saw that Ishmael came out from Abraham. So there is a difference between the perfect Abraham and the real Abraham, small as it may be. But with Moses, he fulfilled his potential 100%, not 99.9. There was no difference between the divine Moses and the Moses that actually walked upon this earth. And this is the importance and the essence of the character trait of truth. Truth means I don't have any personal involvement. I'm not going to let myself get insulted. And if I do get insulted, I will push it off and I will say I'm only pursuing truth. Truth means that which is fair, that which is honest, that which is divine and 100%. We see this difference. One other story which I'll add. The Talmud tells us a story about the great Rabbi Akiva, who took a couple of sages with him on a spiritual journey, as it were, up to heaven, whatever that means. And he says to the other sages, we're going to come to a place, as it were, called the Shayish Tahor, the pure marble. Do not say water when you see it. Why? It's going to look like water. This is such perfect stone that it looks like water. And you're going to really believe it's water. You're going to say, water, water, mayim. Don't you dare do that, says Rabbi Akiva, because it's not. It's not water, it just looks like it. And if you say that, you will perish. Because, and he brings a verse, Dover shkarim lo yikom leneged einai, a person who speaks falsehood cannot stand before me. This is the divine truth, which is absolute. And human truth is the best we can get to. And Moses achieved such a high level that he was able to achieve divine truth. And that drove his drive for justice and for fairness. Let us always pursue truth, be honest with ourselves, be honest with others. Only good things will come from it.